So we've been looking at this awareness meditation thing. And one of the things that it does is it brings into your mind the fact that there is at least one other state of consciousness. There's a few states of consciousness that you're probably aware of. There's being awake and there's being asleep. Okay, that's two. But there's being awake and being in this mind of relentlessly thinking and problem solving and worrying and obsessing about our lives and on the go all the time, trying to do things, achieve things, get things, avoid things, all that stuff. And that's kind of our default way of being in the mind. And in meditation, at least what we've been doing over the last 4 weeks, is we're introducing another state of consciousness where you're not doing that. You're just sitting, and actually we're not doing anything. We're sitting and observing. And just in that pure awareness of the moment without trying to do anything, solve anything, get anything like that. We're just sitting and observing. And I suppose my favorite quote of the 4 weeks was probably Yogi Berra's, which was, "You can observe a lot by just watching." You can observe a lot by just watching. So we were sort of starting to become familiar with this other state of consciousness, of that pure awareness. And sometimes you only touch into it for a moment, just here and there, where you sort of get on the breath or you feel the sensations of your body. Sometimes it only lasts a few moments, but it feels pretty good when you get there. And then the mind kicks in and takes you away, and that's the process. And then you go back, and then your mind takes you away. So this week, we're going to look at something called mantra meditation, which actually works differently. And it actually involves a different state of consciousness. So it is going to, if you do this and it works for you, and it doesn't work for everybody, but if it works for you, you'll find it's a way of transporting you to a different state of consciousness, where things like your sense of space and time, where you are, what time it is, how much time is passing, your sense of yourself, all of that sort of goes away, and you find yourself, what most people find, in a very relaxing, possibly even slightly blissful, at the extreme, people say it's ecstatic, state of something. We'll talk a bit more about that over the 90 minutes, but it's a very, very simple practice. Very simple practice, and it's extremely popular. So is the other meditation. Awareness meditation, very, very popular. Mantra meditation, very popular. In fact, mantra meditation is definitely the go-to meditation of celebrities around the world. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Oprah or Rupert Murdoch or Ellen DeGeneres, or Martin Scorsese or Jerry Seinfeld or Howard Stern. All these people do this type of meditation. They do a particular brand of it called transcendental meditation, but it's based on the same thing. And it's very simple. And basically what it involves is, in your mind, repeating a word or a phrase, or even just a syllable, over and over and over and over and over, and over again. And that's it. And there's something about it. And in some ways I want to tell you a little bit about it to help you do it. But in another way, there's just a lot to discover here. And actually there isn't much to say about it. It's like, do the exercise, and then you discover what there is. So I think, so transcendental meditation is what probably made this well known around the world. The Beatles, I think in 1966, went off to Rishikesh in India to go and study with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and studied transcendental meditation. And they were devotees, and I think most of them carried on meditating their whole lives. So they liked it, and because they were the hottest thing at the time, so it became very, very popular. And I think there are a couple of things about it. One is it's very simple. The other is it is very, it's delicious. It's nice. It's the first technique I really learned, and it's something I've been doing my whole life. And I think it's great, and it's very powerful and wonderful, and I hope you like it. But there's a reason I started with the first 4 weeks, which is that I think, as wonderful as it is, I think some foundational experience and knowledge of awareness training really helps you as you approach mantra meditation. So it's not that I think, oh, now we're graduating to mantra meditation. Not at all. If you really like awareness meditation, stay with awareness meditation. Maybe give this a try just to see what's available, but stick with that. One is not better than the other. And I think they probably eventually end you up in the same place. But they do get there differently by different paths. So I think in the last 4 weeks, we've learned a lot of the stuff that's going to be really useful as we approach this. The only trick is, what are you going to choose? What is your syllable? What is your word? And there are any number of choices. Some people believe it really, really matters. And some words are more powerful or more helpful or more useful than others. That might be true. I don't know. What I think is also true is that you can use any word and you will get at least some of the effect. There's a doctor that I heard about famously uses the word doorknob just because it was the first word that came into his mind, and he thinks it works brilliantly. And he loves it, and he loves using that word. Personally, I've always liked a little bit more traditional mantras. So let's take a look at a few of the different choices. And you can always pick your own as well. So the first one I want to introduce, probably the most classic, most obvious, is just the word Om. Sometimes spelled O-M, sometimes spelled A-U-M. The reason being that the pronunciation is slightly rounder than just O-M. It's not quite Aum, but it's not quite Om either. It's somewhere in between those two. Don't worry too much about it. The pronunciation, some people will say it really matters. I don't think it matters that much. It's not our native language. So find what works for you. If you've been to yoga class, you've heard it chanted at the end of the class. But Om, Om, Om is something along the lines of how it's pronounced. Within the mythology, it's known as the primordial sound, whatever that means. It's the sound by which the universe is said to have come into being. And there is something delicious about the vibration of the sound, if you say it out loud, of the Om. And it's said that that vibration is what caused the world to come into being, back in the mythology of Hinduism. And you can just repeat that over and over and over again as your mantra. Another option, within the same tradition, slightly softer, I think, is just the word Sring. 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 And if you like the sort of the great simplicity of this, single syllable, not a word that's going to mean very much to you probably, and some say that's quite important. It helps if the mind is not actually clinging on to the word and thinking about the word. Again, maybe at some level that's important, I'm not sure, but some people think that's helpful. So if you like this idea of either Om or Sring, there you go, there's two options. Now, some people get very upset with this whole mantra meditation thing. They say, oh, you're just trying to turn us all into Hindus or Buddhists or whatever. And it makes me smile, because the truth is that this is an international, multicultural tradition and exercise that has spanned every religion and non-religion since probably the beginning of time. It's a technique that people have found without cross-interference. So Christians found it, and I'm pretty sure found it without like some TM person coming around in the 4th century going, oh, okay, pay your $3,000 and I'll give you your secret mantra. I'm making fun of them a little bit. But I think people found this, that if you just repeat a phrase over and over, something powerful can happen. And I just want to share with you, I shared with you the quote that I really liked from the first week was by Yogi Berra. You can observe a lot by just watching. Well, this quote is not quite as pithy, but I think within it is everything to do with mantra meditation. And the reason I really, really like this quote is because it actually comes from 4th century Christianity. So in the 4th century, there was some elder of the tradition who was struggling with exactly the same problem that we all have, and had discovered this technique, or he'd maybe been taught this technique, that he found worked. And I know one of the theories is you're never supposed to read the slide, because you can read the slide, so why would I read you the slide? But I just want to break it down a little bit. And he starts out by suggesting that I must give you a formula for meditation. You're like, okay, cool. Now, to be fair, meditation is not quite the word he used here, but he meant the same thing. Back then, the word contemplation, so contemplatio was the original word that they used, and meditation for them actually meant something different, where you're really, really thinking about something very hard and deep and in lots of different ways and all that kind of stuff. So that's not what we mean by meditation in this. So I've paraphrased this slightly, but it's basically exactly the same. So I must give you a formula for meditation. If you carefully keep this formula before you, it will help you to mount to contemplation of the highest truth. Like I said, not quite as pithy as Yogi Berra, but what he's offering is that this is going to help you get to contemplation of the highest truth. Now, within his tradition, of course, that was something to do with the nature of God or Jesus or something like that. But then it's this next sentence I love. It's like, perhaps wandering thoughts surge about your soul like boiling water, and you cannot control them. I'm like, yeah, I am familiar with that. And then he says, everyone who uses this formula for meditation can drive every other sort of thought from their heart. The instruction is, the mind should go on repeating this formula until it can cast away the multiplicity of other thoughts and restrict itself to this single phrase. And then he went on to explain what the mantra was. Now again, not quite so pithy perhaps, but this is 4th century Christianity, just to partly as an effort to show this is not just an Eastern thing at all. It's a universal thing. And the mantra that he recommended you just repeat over and over again to mount to contemplation of the highest truth was, O God, come to my assistance. O Lord, make haste to help me. And to be fair, that was probably an Aramaic or Greek or something. But anyway, in English, O God, come to my assistance. O Lord, make haste to help me. In Judaism, for at least 2,000 years, there has been this spiritual tradition within their religion whereby they would repeat over and over some of the words that they use for God. They don't use the holy word, but they use Adonai or Elohim, and they'll literally just repeat that over and over again. Or one of the other very common mantras that's been used thousands of years ago and more recently in the Kabbalistic tradition is Adonai Hu Ha Elohim. Adonai Hu Ha Elohim. And they would just repeat that over and over again. Within Islam, they also do something with variations on names for God. But there's a story I love about Rumi, who, the great Sufi poet, who was going through the market in town someday, and there were various people beating metal. I think they were beating gold, actually. And they had a rhythm to the way they did it. And he thought he could hear, as he got quiet as he was walking, and he was just listening to the sound, what he thought he heard coming from the beating of the metal was La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. And the Sufis will just repeat that over and over and over again, and because they believe it helps you mount to contemplation of the highest truth. Okay, they don't use that expression. This in the Sufi tradition, this exercise of repeating itself over and over again, they don't call it mantra meditation. They call it the zikr. And they have this wonderful phrase that you begin doing the zikr and you do the zikr. So you repeat the phrase over and over and over again. But then, eventually, the zikr does you. And what they believe is that this is about remembering. And this is kind of a premise within all the traditions, really. Is that at your core, deep down, your deepest self is your best self, is your purest self, your wisest self, your most courageous self. But we get distracted by the world, by influences, by our concerns, our fears, our worries, our to-dos, our email. All this stuff kind of gets in the way. And one of the things I like about the word mantra is that it actually means crossing over the mind. So we are crossing over the mind. It's a vehicle for getting past the mind towards your deepest self, whatever that is, and that's for you to discover. But that's kind of the premise. So when they say, you start out by doing the zikr and then the zikr does you, it is this sense that it's a vehicle for getting you across into that different state of completely different state of mind, different state of consciousness, where you are really beyond the mind. Now, it's entirely possible you don't like all this religious stuff. You're a good die-hard cynic. Don't believe in any of this religious, spiritual stuff. That's fine. You don't have to. Even within English, there have been derivations that have sort of taken out the whole spiritual element. One of the most common ones is just simply to say the word one. I have a sneaking suspicion it's a little bit close to the word om. But again, it doesn't really mean much. Just say one. It might also hint at some other sense of that in this beyond state, this transcendent state that one can get into, that there is a sense that actually, everything is one. All the sort of divisions come down and we all feel connected in some kind of universal mystical union. So that may be part of what it's hinting at, I don't know. But just saying the word one over and over again. It's a phrase I like. It's a bit tricky is to just say the phrase I am enough over and over and over. I am enough. I am enough. I am enough. Now, the reason I say it's a little tricky is it is a phrase that has meaning. It has quite a lot of meaning. And it can send you off spinning and thinking and going, I am enough. And my mother really wasn't correct for saying I wasn't enough. And wherever your mind might go with I am enough, that's not what we're trying to do. We're not turning this into a thinking exercise of trying to convince yourself that you are enough. It's just a phrase that I think it's quite an interesting positive affirmation to try and build in instead of the usual affirmation or whatever the opposite of an affirmation is, whereby you and I and probably most people tend to say, I am not enough over and over again in our head, except maybe we have a slightly different way of saying it. I am not clever enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not diligent enough. I'm not successful enough. I'm not ... enough. Whatever is your enough. That's many people's mantra in reality, is that they are not enough. So I quite like this idea that actually, hold on a second, here's the opposite of that. I am enough. But not such that you thinking about it and go, I am enough. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to use it as a vehicle for getting across the mind. So just using it as a phrase that you're just saying without really attaching much meaning to it. Just, I am enough. I am enough. I am enough. those of you who've studied with me before know that my personal favorite is a Buddhist mantra. And it's just my favorite, I suppose, because I was taught it when I was 18 years old. And I was sort of amazed. I was in India, in the Himalayas, and went to this town called Dharamsala. And you would see like graffiti everywhere. Like everywhere you see this stuff written, and it's in Tibetan. And I eventually noticed that it was all the same. It was just the same few characters repeated over and over again. And eventually I sort of said, well, what is that? And they go, oh, it's Om Mani Padme Hum. And we're going to do this exercise where you say this over and over again in your head silently, but it's not the only way to do mantra meditation, actually. There are three traditional ways. I mean, there are many ways of doing mantra meditation, but there are three traditional ways. One is what we're doing, or at least what I'm doing, which is silently in my mind. If you're alone in your house, knock yourself out. Go ahead and chant this. And there is something different about chanting. To chant the mantra, actually, to have the vibration vibrate the bones of your body as you say it, creates a slightly different experience than just thinking the words. So there's saying it in your mind, there's chanting, and then there is also writing it over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that's what they tend to do in the East. And one of the things I really like about Om Mani Padme Hum is that one translation of it, and it's a loose translation, but it's one translation of it, is that this roughly means happiness is within. Happiness is within you. And so when I was in India and I sort of saw this, and they're writing this on rocks, on walls, on all the prayer flags, with all that tiny writing on the little flags that are flying. Every single one of those things is basically saying happiness is within you. Happiness is within you. And I just love the contrast to the West, where all of our graffiti tends to come in that happiness is outside of you. Happiness is a BMW. Happiness is Coca-Cola. Happiness is a bigger house, bigger car, new stuff, more money. But happiness is something external to you. So all of our advertising, all of the commercials you see are basically saying, if you want to be happy, you need something else. And all the advertising, or at least all the graffiti in the East, at least in places like Dharamsala, all of the writing everywhere is basically saying happiness is within you. So I like Om Mani Padme Hum, but all I want you to do is just pick something.